Amelia Mary Earhart was born July 24, 1897. Her parents were Amy and Edwin Earhart. Her sister was born as Grace Muriel. Amelia Earhart was born and raised in Atchison, Kansas. From the age of 3 to 11, she grew up with her grandparents, the Otises. During this time, her parents lived in Kansas City with Amelia's sister. As a child, Amelia Earhart loved seeing new places and meeting new people. She was adventurous and participated in many sports such as softball, basketball, skating, horseback riding, and tennis. She was very opposed to anything that had restrictions based on gender. She attended a private school called College Preparatory School. She is most commonly known for being the first female pilot to make a solo non-stop transatlantic flight in 1932. However, her first flight took place in 1920. She was able to pay for flying lessons through various jobs and money from her mother. Before becoming a pilot, she was a nurse during World War I. In 1928, Amelia Earhart was working at Denison House, a settlement house in Boston. She just happened to be in the right place at the right time to take part in a groundbreaking flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Flying the Atlantic was a frightening prospect since many people had lost their lives in the attempt, and flying was still relatively new. However, Earhart was unafraid. She said, "Of course I realized there was a possibility of not returning when first I considered going. Once faced and settled, there really wasn't any good reason to refer to it again." With this attitude, Earhart and the two male pilots departed on June 17, 1928 from Newfoundland, and 20 hours, 40 minutes later, they arrived on June 18th in Wales. Earhart became famous literally overnight as the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Despite the overwhelming attention from the press, Earhart herself admitted she was merely a passenger on the flight, and the true credit belonged to the male pilots.
In 1932, Amelia became the second person and the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Her intentions were to follow the Lindbergh Trail when she left Harbor Gate, flying across the sea to land in Paris, France. In the midst of her flight, she encountered major problems with ice at higher altitudes, causing her plane's engine to cut out frequently and forcing her to fly dangerously close to the Whitecaps. Not only did she encounter environmental inconveniences, but she also noticed gasoline dripping down her neck after she refueled. Despite this, her optimistic spirit kept her going. She eventually made landfall north of the center of Ireland instead of Paris. She was also the first person to succeed at this flight twice.
Earhart's solo transatlantic flight opened the door for women to participate in some of the major air races of the 1930s. The All-Women's Air Derby was an 8-day race from Santa Monica to Cleveland with 15 stops the pilots had to find using instinct and road maps. The race organizers feared being blamed if a woman was killed, so they insisted that a male navigator accompany each pilot. Earhart declared the Derby was no longer a race with such a restriction and refused to participate. Consequently, the rule was dropped and the women pilots were held to the same eligibility standards as men. After this triumph, Earhart entered the Derby and placed third. Her participation drew attention to the race, proving to everyone that women were completely capable of flying in adverse and competitive conditions.
Amelia was on a roll with setting records. Her solo Honolulu flight was managed by her husband George P. Putnam. He arranged the funding to equip the plane and organized the logistics that would help Amelia arrive on the Hawaiian coast safely. A publicity campaign was started for the Sugar Planters Association that would use Amelia's flight to maximize the operation and earn her a $10,000 purse. Despite this campaign, Amelia denied any suggestion of a trans-Pacific flight to the press and said that her intentions were to fly from island to island to give lectures. Her first attempt to depart was denied by the Navy because her radio equipment did not meet safety standards. On January 11, 1935, after all the kinks were worked out, Amelia received clearance and proceeded to become the first person to fly solo across the Pacific Ocean from Honolulu, Hawaii, to Oakland, California. The flight lasted 17 hours and 7 minutes and was a total of 2,400 miles. After Amelia succeeded, President Roosevelt personally congratulated her with a letter.
While Earhart's record-setting flights first made her famous, she also contributed significantly to women's opportunities in aviation. As the first woman president of the National Aeronautic Association, she persuaded the organization to establish separate female records, because women lacked the resources to compete fairly against men for world titles. Setting records gave women pilots publicity and potential endorsements while reminding the world that women were capable of flying too. Earhart also helped found the 99s, a support and advocacy group for women pilots. Amelia Earhart was an inspiration to her female contemporaries. Aviation was a male-dominated industry and women were not welcome to join. If a man crashed, it was attributed to equipment failure or bad luck, but if a woman crashed, it was her fault, showing she was an incapable pilot. Amelia Earhart acknowledged the difficulty women faced, but she still believed they should break into the aviation field. In a 1934 speech, Earhart said, "In aviation as a whole, women are outnumbered 40 to 1, but I feel that more will gain admittance as a greater number knock at the door. If and when you knock at the door, it might be well to bring an axe along. You may have to chop your way through."
Amelia's around-the-world flight started in March of 1937 in Oakland, California. In the midst of her larger goal, the female pilot set the record for east to west in 15 hours and 47 minutes. In March, the plane was badly damaged during an attempt at a takeoff. Fortunately, there was no fire and no one was injured in the accident. In June, after the collapsed undercarriage was repaired, Amelia started on her second attempt at an around-the-world flight, setting off in short stages between South America, Africa, Calcutta, and Port Darwin, Australia. Her friends and crewmates thought she was not paying enough attention to her equipment, safety features, and preparations. The last transmission was received after she took off from Lae, New Guinea. George liaised with the Navy and Coast Guard in an attempt to contact the plane and find Amelia. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. She was supposed to land on Howland Island, but she did not make it. Before she lost radio contact, she sent a message. 281 North Howland, call KHAQQ. Don't hold with us much longer. Above water, shut off. It was the last transmission from Amelia Earhart. There have been different ideas of where she landed. One theory was that she touched down in the Marshall Islands. Later, it was confirmed because remains of the plane were found on one of the islands. There are many stories of what really happened to Amelia Earhart. Some stories make sense, while others are quite out there. Some people believe she settled down in New Jersey to become a housewife, although she hardly seems like the kind of woman who would give up what she loved just to become a housewife. Others believe she became a spy for the U.S. but was captured by the Japanese. The real fact is, she missed Howland Island and ran out of gas, crashing into the Marshall Islands and was never seen again.
Her own accomplishments demonstrated that it was possible for a woman to be successful in a career most commonly taken by men. Amelia Earhart was the first person to cross the Atlantic by air twice, and the fourth woman to get a transport license, an indication of a professional pilot. Amelia Earhart set a striking example for women to follow, showing that women were capable of doing things they could never before have imagined.